conservative felon. I'm going to add you to the stage. Hello, Fish. How are you?
What's happening, brother? How you doing?
I'm good. Tell the people who you are and what you do, and tell us your thoughts about what happened today in court with the indictments.
I served 17 years in the Department of Corrections, and during those 17 years, I definitely experienced myself the beat up squad. One thing that I have to honestly say, I won't talk too much here, is that I think a lot of people need to understand that there are good and bad correctional officers, right? And that needs to be clear. That is no justification. I'm not making any justification for these officers that beat Robert Brooke to death. They need to go away for murder. That's my opinion. That they need to go away for murder. But there's a percentage of guys in there that are real good, and that never went out of their way to harass me, and that go in there and clock in and do their time. There are guys like that, and that needs to be, I need to admit that as a former prisoner as well. But there is an alarming number of men in there that are very abusive, right? And so that really needs to be addressed, because I was in 9 different prisons during my 17 years. And in every single prison, there was a group of officers that were hands on, and we're dealing with, as bad as it may sound, we're dealing with a bunch of country boys who are upstate New York. They're not really used to dealing with a group of minorities. And if you saw it in the strikes, I mean, you look, they're striking in 30 prisons right now. And when you look at the people that are striking, you see huge groups of white men in camouflage clothes burning fires outside of prison. That's what you see. That's not my opinion. There are no black faces in that crowd. There are no Spanish faces in that crowd. You see a bunch of upstate white country boys wearing camouflage jackets standing outside, right? That tells a lot about character, you know what I mean? And that's a reality whether people want to realize that or not. And with that said, some of them are good, but an alarming number are bad, right? Getting to the court case real quick, their bail was definitely way too low. Their bail should have been, they should have got a $500,000 bail. A $500,000 bail would have been fair. This was a murder that was caught on video. There wasn't much to debate about that. You know what I mean? But as I said, you're dealing with a town where the judge knows the DA. They all know those correctional officers. The correctional officers know all the law enforcement up there. It's a very small town. It's a very small town. This is just my opinion. And it's very early to tell, but this is what I think is going to happen. I think some of the lesser charges are going to get dismissed. I think a couple of those officers are going to walk scot-free. Free. I think a couple will be put on probation, and I think a couple of them will get some time. You know what I mean? They might get time for manslaughter in the second. I don't think anyone's going away for murder. That's just my opinion. I don't think they're going to go away for murder. I think they might go away for manslaughter in the first or the second. And manslaughter in the second, the maximum sentence is 12 and a half to 25 years. But they could also get 5 years for manslaughter in the second. So it really, is a long way to go. I think the good thing is, I'll end with this. I think the good thing is that they're ratting on each other already, right?
Yeah.
They already made that clear. The district attorney made that clear, that there's cooperating witnesses, and cooperating witnesses are going to do the most damage, because those were people that were in the room, that saw what happened, and they're willing to talk for a plea bargain. They're willing to talk for less time. And that's what happens when murder gets involved. I had a murder case. I went away from murder, and I ended up pleading guilty to manslaughter. I was charged with murder in the second degree. I sat on Rikers Island for 3 years fighting the case. The judge reduced the charge to manslaughter in the first. I pled guilty to manslaughter in the first, and I got the maximum sentence, which was 12 and a half to 25. But my point was, everybody started talking. When murder gets involved, people start talking. So we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. But I appreciate you covering the case as well, because as we know, the mainstream media really stayed away from the case for the most part. and we didn't see this on Channel 11 New York News, and we saw it on some upstate news channels. The mainstream media stayed away from the beating death. And you were right. If an animal was killed, there would have been more coverage if an animal was killed. And they treated him like an animal, which was really sad, man. So, I mean, only time will tell now. It's a shame. They should have sat in jail. They shouldn't have got bail. They should have sat in jail for the next 8-9 months until they went to trial, so they could get a feel of what it's like to be locked up. It is an injustice that they're still walking free. That's an injustice. It's a murder charge. I wasn't given bail. They didn't give me any bail when I caught a murder charge, right? And mine wasn't on video, so these guys got bail, which is crazy. They should have sat in jail, but it is relieving to know that they lost their job. It's not enough, but they lost their job. Their badges were taken away from them. Their guns were taken away from them. And guns mean everything to those type of guys. They love their guns. Upstate country boy correctional officers love their weapons. They'll never be able to possess a weapon again as long as they're convicted of a felony. They'll never have a badge again. They'll never have a law enforcement job again as long as they're found guilty of some type of felony. But they still need to go away.
What do you think? Like, what's the root cause analysis? Like, what makes this even possible that you could have this happen in the United States of America in a prison? Somebody just slaughtered the way that Robert Brooks was. What's the mentality behind this?
Yeah, it's hard to say what what the mentality is behind it. But I say this, that in order to become, what can change, right, to stop the mentality, I think is a little more important. The mentality is that they don't see them as equal to them. That's their mentality, right? They don't see them as equals because going back to it again, you're dealing with an upstate town where there's no minorities. There's no minorities there, right? And they see them as pieces of shit. They see the prisoners as pieces of shit. When I was in prison, it was the way they talk to you is like you're nothing. I give an example. You could be standing in the wrong spot. Excuse my language for a minute, but I'm going to give you an example of how you're spoken to by a correctional officer. You can be a prisoner and you might be standing in an area that you're not allowed to stand in. And the guy says to you, "Hey, you fucking asshole. What the fuck are you doing, sir? Are you stupid? What are you standing over there for? Get the fuck over there." That's how they talk to you, right? And so from the beginning, there's no common courtesy. You know what I mean? There's no rehabilitation. It's incarceration in New York State. They don't have an attitude like they're trying to help you. They don't have an attitude like they're trying to help you change your behavior. It's you're an animal. You're locked up, right? And I think a way to make a difference is that in order to be a correctional officer, all you need is a high school diploma, right? And that's not enough. You need to give them, even if it's a 2-year associate's degree, they need to have some type of degree in social work, some type of degree in human interaction, some type of degree in psychology. Even if it's a 2-year degree, they need to learn and be educated on how to deal with human beings. Because the fact is, and I hate to keep going back to it, but the fact is you're dealing with a bunch of country guys that were farmers. That's not an insult when I say that. These prisons were built in the middle of farmland, and most of these guys were farmers. That's not knocking them, man, but that's what they did before the prison was built. And then all of a sudden it employed 600 men in the community, and now you're giving them a badge and a gun and power and telling them you're in charge of this minority right here. A minority that doesn't even live in their communities. So what's going to be the outcome of that, right? It's not going to be a good outcome. I always said that the African-American guy had it so much rougher in prison than a white guy had it. It's true. And I don't care how that sounds, man. I lived there for 17 years. I know. You know what I mean? Where a correctional officer would come up to me and say, what job you want? And not bother you as much, where they wouldn't really do that with a black guy. You know what I mean? And it was because you were like one of them. They considered you like one of them. You follow what I'm saying? And so it was a lot harder on those guys. And then here we go. There's two sides to every story, right? There's two sides to every story. A lot of the men in prison don't carry themselves correctly, right? And
Mm,
now we're not talking about the Robert Brooks case. We're just talking about
yeah.
prison in general. A lot of the men in there don't carry themselves correctly, right? And so, hence the reason that many of these officers are fed up and tired. They really do have a hard job. I'm not talking about the ones that beat people now unnecessarily. I'm talking about correctional officers that are getting shit thrown on them, correctional officers that are getting piss thrown on them, correctional officers that are dealing with guys that run around all day, cutting each other with scalpels, stabbing each other with razors, robbing each other, breaking all the rules, causing havoc in the prison. I would say that 70% of the prisoners are like that, right? So that's a very rough job for a correctional officer, right? So the guys make it worse on themselves. I have to admit that they make it. We're not talking about Robert Brooks now. I'm just talking about prison, right? The guys make it a lot harder on themselves. I was a guy. I'm not patting myself on the back. That knew how to do time. I knew how to do time. When I went into prison, I knew that it was their house, right? And I was just a prisoner. And so I knew how to yes a correctional officer to death. Yo, Fish, go clean the bathroom. No problem, you got it. Right? Where these other kids didn't do stuff like that. They'd be like, yo, that's not my job. Fuck that. I'm not doing that. And they made their lives hard for them. Right? And I used to try and preach to these young kids, and especially preach to the young black kids in there. I used to tell them, yo, listen, this ain't your house, dude. This is their house and they're in control. Our job is to do our time and get out of here. Right? So just do your time and get out of here. But a lot of them didn't do that. They wanted to act like gangsters. They wanted to act like tough guys. They wanted to run around and still getting high. You know what I mean? And so those guys up there ain't having that, man. They're not having that, you know. It's like a psychology game in there, you know. When you go in there as a prisoner, just you know, you got to just do your time like a man and mind your p's and q's, and you can get through it no matter what race you are. But unfortunately, a lot of guys go in there and they bring the street in there with them, you know, and so the officers are under pressure. This is why they're striking right now, and they want the HALT Act brought back, which is solitary confinement, because solitary confinement. I did a video on my channel about solitary confinement. It was torture for me. I was ready to commit suicide in solitary confinement. It was the worst experience I had in my life. And with that said, you need solitary confinement in a prison. You cannot allow prisoners to run around and stab and cut and fight and not be able to segregate them from the population, because you'll have chaos. That's just a fact, right? And so these officers are saying we have chaos in here because you're not allowing us to do their job. You have to allow them to do their job. That doesn't mean beat someone to death, but still allow them to do their job. So there's two sides, brother. There's two sides to every story, you know? Yeah. The only reason the charges were brought against these officers is because of the pressure of the people, the pressure of the Robert Brooks family, the pressure of people on the internet, the pressure of people on YouTube, right? We're putting because it took 2 months for them to do anything. I don't think they were preparing their I don't think they were preparing their case for 2 months. I think they were trying to sweep it under the rug, right? But people didn't allow them to sweep it under the rug. And so I don't think they're looking, I think it was the pressure that made them bring charges. I don't think they're looking for justice, right? I really don't. The district attorney got up there, Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick got a terrible record when you look at Fitzpatrick.
He does.
I can name cases where he's very pro-law, he's very pro-law enforcement, right? He's one of those upstate guys. I'll end with just to give you two examples of Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick retired from being a district attorney, right, for 24 hours so he can sign papers, get his pension, and then the next morning became a district attorney again, right? And so what they call double dipping, you know what I mean? So he also had a case where someone in his office killed a man driving under the influence, killed a teenager driving under the influence. He walked scot-free with probation. That guy, he killed a teenager driving drunk. He walked away with probation. There was a case 6 months ago where one of the district attorneys in his office refused to pull over for a police officer, made the police officer follow her all the way home. She pulled into a garage. When she got out, she started berating the officer, yelling at the officer, "I'm the district attorney." He didn't do anything to her. He says, I'm sure she learned her lesson. Anyone else would have been in jail in handcuffs right away. So I don't like his track record. You know what I mean? But hopefully the spotlight is on him now and he's forced to do anything. I don't know. We'll see, man. We'll see. You know, when they gave 100, I'll end with this for sure. When they stated the $100,000 bail today, the district attorney usually speaks up right away and says, Your Honor, I request a higher bail. $100,000 isn't enough. This was a murder that was caught on videotape. I'm suggesting that we give them a $300,000. He didn't say a word.
He did
He
not
didn't say a word.
He
They
did not
gave a
say a
low
word.
bail, and he sat there with his mouth shut and didn't say anything. Right? If he wanted them in jail, he would have opened his mouth and spoke about that right there with the bail. But he also has to act like a district attorney. So he gives a beautiful press conference afterwards. We're going to seek justice. We're going to do this. He has to say that. We'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see how good he is. Time will tell. That's it. Time will tell. Yeah.
So, Fish,
Yeah.
where can people find you if they want to check out your channel?
They can just go to Conservative Felon. I'm on YouTube as Conservative Felon, and I have my videos up there. Mostly what I try and do is I usually don't follow the news like this, like you do. And I just the Robert Brooks case struck me, you know what I mean? So I felt like covering it. My channel's really about trying to persuade the youth from becoming incarcerated, you know, trying to help people make proper choices and decisions, explaining my prison experience. I usually don't cover the current events, you know. But with a case like Robert Brooks, it was exceptional. I really felt the need to do it. But they can go to Conservative Felon, check out my videos. And thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I will link your information. And thank you so much. God bless you. Take care.
Absolutely, man. Thank you again. Take care. Bye bye, everybody.